Yo, for today's video, I'm going to go back to propaganda, the formation of men's attitudes. Because for women's attitudes, you just got to brainwash everybody, or brainwash her specifically. It's not that hard. So anyway, for today's talk, I was thinking about, I was reading about agitation propaganda versus integration propaganda. And before I define it, it's because I want to talk about hatred and hate. Because if you watch the movie They Live, you know how the aliens like to promote hate. Just like the demon rats today are promoting a lot of hate, because hate is part of integration propaganda. And I think that was one of the main purposes of Donald Trump, is to promote that racial war and hate. So I think this section will be useful. So here, this is chapter, I forgot what chapter it is, but the characteristics of propaganda, I think it's chapter 2. Propaganda of agitation and propaganda of integration. The second great distinction between agitation and integration, and is based on Lenin's definition, even though the meaning is reversed. So it is like propaganda of subversion versus propaganda of collaboration. So propaganda of agitation is the most visible and widespread and gets most of the attention. It's most often subversive and has a stamp of opposition. It is led by a party seeking to destroy the government or the established order. Kind of reminds me of Charas. A lot of stoners also tend to be against the order establishment. It seeks rebellion or war. It always had a place in the course of history. All revolutionary movements, all popular wars have been nourished by such propaganda of agitation. And then some examples. So if they want a revolutionary course of action or war, destruction, they use this agitation propaganda, because they're using subversion against the enemy. And that's how Nazism grew too, because Hitler was an agitation. So they want to stretch your energies to the utmost, obtain substantial sacrifices, and induce the individual to bear heavy ordeals. Now that happens to do with the commandment of not using God's name in vain, or in Hindu yoga, it means asteya, or non-stealing, and also or responsibility, and also internally it means tapas, which means sacrifice and hardships. So that's the purpose of agitation propaganda, or subversion propaganda. And it's usually for less educated people, less informed people. So in contrast to the propaganda of agitation is the propaganda of integration, the propaganda of developed nations and characteristic of our civilization. In fact, it did not exist before the 20th century. It is a propaganda of conformity. It is related to the fact analyzed earlier, that in the Western society It is no longer sufficient to obtain a transitory political act, such as a vote. One needs total adherence to society's truths and behavioral patterns. As the more perfectly uniform the society, the stronger its power and effectiveness. Each member should only an organic and functional fragment of it, perfectly adapted and integrated. He must share the stereotypes, beliefs, and reactions of the group. He must be an active participant in its economic, ethical, aesthetic, and political doings. All his activities, all his sentiments are dependent on this collectivity. And as he is often reminded, he can fulfill himself only through this collectivity as a member of the group. Propaganda of integration thus aims at making the individual participate in his society in every way. It is a long-term propaganda, a self-reproducing propaganda that seeks to obtain stable behavior, to adapt the individual to his everyday life, to reshape his thoughts and behavior in terms of the permanent social setting. So you get the idea. I think what I was thinking of is that agitation propaganda sounds like the police coming through your door and putting you in jail. And then integration propaganda is like when you have to go to the court or when you're in probation and you're out of jail. And then you have to deal with adjusting to everybody else. Oh, man. We can see that this propaganda is more extensive and complex than propaganda of agitation. It must be permanent, for the individual can no longer be left to himself. Get off our backs with this integration propaganda. So it rationalizes situations and transforms unconscious actions of members of society into conscious desired activity that is visible, laudable, and justified. So for example, I joined Toastmasters and became a teacher for a certain purpose, and then over time I forgot my purpose because of all the stress and all the pressure and cracking, and I cracked too. So I kind of forgot my purpose, and then they come along and they praise you and try to change your purpose or try to make you into something else. So that's also integration propaganda on an individual level. But everybody's like, every society is like this. People in groups are fucking terrible, especially when the leaders are bad. So integration propaganda aims at stabilizing the social body, at unifying and reinforcing it. So that's why government uses it. Okay, so this is the important part I wanted to show. Generally, only one element, hatred, can be immediately satisfied. So they're saying that, okay, one essential problem remains. When a revolution movement is launched, it operates with agitation propaganda. But once a revolutionary party has taken power, it must begin immediately to operate with integration propaganda. That is the way to balance its power and stabilize the situation. Stabilizing the situation. But the transition from one type of propaganda to other is extremely delicate and difficult. After one has over the years excited the masses, flung them into adventures, fed their hopes and their hatreds, opened the gates of action to them, and assured them that all their actions were justified. This part is important. But the transition from one type of propaganda to the other is difficult and delicate. After one has excited the masses, flung them into adventures, fed their hopes and their hatreds. So, you raise the bitches on Disney and excite them with subliminal sex messaging. Then you flung them into adventures. All the childhood adventures of going in the closet and hiding around and all that sexual stuff. romantic stuff, then feeding their hopes and their hatreds, then brainwashing them in school and in the media, opening the gates of action to them, then letting them go to college and shit, turning them 18, letting them loose on the world, and assuring them that all their actions were justified. Assuring them that all their actions are justified. Okay. Right. All the feminists and feminism and all that. It is difficult to make them re-enter the ranks. So now they can't be good women anymore. To integrate them into the normal framework of politics and economics. What has been unleashed cannot be brought under control so easily, particularly habits of violence, the thottery, or of taking the law into one's own hands. These disappear very slowly. That's why we have coronavirus. Thank God for Fauci for locking these thoughts down. Especially these broke-ass hoes. They can't be hoeing around us easily no more. Except for OnlyFans, of course. Too many fucking enablers out here in this feminazi USSA. This is all the more true because the results achieved by revolution are usually deceptive. Just to seize power is not enough. The people want to give full vent to the hatred developed by agitation propaganda and to have the promised bread or land immediately. And the troops that helped in the seizure of power rapidly become the opposition and continue to act as they did under the influence of subversion propaganda. So they're talking about the police that we're seeing turning against us with this new regime, which is still the same people in power, but now they don't have the man of the people complaining anymore. The newly established government must then use propaganda to eliminate these difficulties and to prevent the continuation of the battle. But this must be propaganda designed to incorporate individuals into the new order, to transform their opponents into collaborators of the state, to make them accept delays in the fulfillment of promises. She said, wait for the puss, hey. She said, pay for the puss, hey. Wait for the puss, wait. In other words, it must be integration propaganda. Generally, only one element, hatred, can be immediately satisfied. Everything else must be changed. So they're saying that when you switch from the previous agitation propaganda to the integration propaganda, then all these promises they made and all this goals that they had and all that hopes and the hatred and the adventures, everything stops, but only the hatred can be satisfied now. So that's why Alan Watt used to say that you become what you hate, because the same enemy that used agitation propaganda is now going to use integration propaganda, and you're going to become the exact thing you didn't want, that you were initially fighting against. Using integration propaganda, you become that, using agitation propaganda, now you become that with integration propaganda. So what Alan Watts said is pretty true, verified by this book, because hatred is part of integration propaganda that makes everybody united, and unity is not always good. First you must be united within. So integration propaganda is slow, gradual, and imperceptible. So that's why we have so much feminism, because they have been integrated very well, slowly, gradually, and imperceptibly. It's like that thing you say about, like, when the young bull saw the field of cows, it told the older cow, let's go and rape a couple of them. And the older cow said, no, let's slowly walk down and not run at them. And using integration propaganda, we'll brainwash them and we'll make them all our slaves, and we'll make the best of them our sex slaves. So that's the that's what we see today in our psychopathic society. So yeah, hatred is bad. Groupthink is bad, and having these external causes of hate is not going to give us a lasting solution to our internal problems. Peace out from Rap Quake, aka Kunal. Let me drop a rhyme, cause I'm on the ball. Might even smoke some cannabinols, cause it's a cloudy afternoon and I'm feeling the gloom. Not letting the doom consume, sneezing up like I'm in a tomb, raiding like Hamlet, but now it's gonna be raining, cause it's already November, Jack. That's the month on the calendar, in fact. I need to hit that chronic sax so I'm out, right? Hatred is bad.